She begged me to bomb it for her daughter. She placed ninth. The first thing I heard when I came back to life was applause that did not belong to me yet. It rolled through the velvet auditorium in waves, heavy and polished, the kind of applause people give when they want to prove they understand classical music even though half of them have been reading the program notes like subtitles. I stood behind the black curtain of the Aurelian International Young Pianist Finals with both hands pressed against the cool side of a Steinway Grand, feeling the wood vibrate faintly from the performer before me. My fingers were cold. My pulse was wrong. Too fast, too deep, too impossible. The scent of rosin from the string player's warm-up room mixed with perfume, dust, stage lights, old velvet, and the sharp metallic smell of fear. A stage manager in black whispered, "Celeste Vale, you're next." Celeste. My name. My old name. My living name. For one impossible second, I thought the afterlife had made a concert hall out of punishment. Then I saw the framed finalist schedule on the backstage monitor, saw the date, saw my face beside finalist number 6, and understood with such violence that my knees almost gave way. I was not 42, dying alone in a cheap rehabilitation apartment with nerve damage in my right hand and one frozen recording of my ruined concerto playing on an old laptop. I was 17 again. I was back at the night of the Aurelian Finals. I was about to play the Rachmaninoff Third Concerto that should have changed my life. And in less than 4 minutes, Isadora Bellamy would clutch my hands backstage and beg me to bomb it for her daughter. The performer before me ended on a bright, glittering chord. Applause rose again. I stared at my hands. They were young.
No tendon scars.
No swelling around the knuckles. No numbness crawling from the wrist into the fourth finger. My nails were trimmed short. My right thumb had a tiny crescent of dry skin from over-practicing octaves, just as it had the first time. I flexed once. Every finger answered. That alone nearly broke me. In my first life, after the scandal, after the lost scholarship, after years of teaching scales to children whose parents wanted trophies more than music, after the accident in the conservatory stairwell that damaged my hand and ended even the small career I had left, I used to dream of moving all 5 fingers without pain. Now the body I had destroyed trying to be obedient had been returned before the obedience happened. I looked at the monitor again. Finalist number 5, Adrian Cho, was bowing. Finalist number 6, Celeste Vale, next. Finalist number 7, Marianne Bellamy, after me. Marianne, Isadora's daughter, the Academy princess. 17, blonde, exquisite, photographed constantly, coached by every famous teacher her mother could buy, or charm, or threaten. In my first life, Marianne was presented as a miracle, the girl who breathed Chopin before she could read. She did breathe beautifully. That was the danger. She could play a phrase like moonlight falling on glass. But the Aurelian Finals were not a private salon. They were war under lights. The winner received the Aurelius Grant, full conservatory tuition in Vienna, an international management contract, a recital tour, recording sessions, and the kind of introduction that could turn a talented, unknown girl into someone critics reviewed instead of ignored. My family could never have afforded even the application fee if my teacher, Mr. Navarre, had not paid it secretly. Marianne needed the win to complete a mythology. I needed it to begin a life. Isadora knew both. The first time, I played exactly as I had prepared in rehearsal, not perfect, but alive. The orchestra followed. The cadenza opened. The audience stopped breathing. Then, backstage afterward, before Marianne's performance, Isadora Bellamy found me near the green room, took my hands in hers, and began to cry. Not elegantly. Not like a woman performing grief. Real tears, or close enough to real that my 17-year-old heart mistook them for truth. She told me Marianne was fragile. She told me Marianne had been fighting panic attacks all season. She told me if I played as I had in rehearsal, Marianne would unravel before walking on stage. She said the judges were leaning between us, that only one girl's future could survive the night, and that I was strong enough to recover from a loss. She called me gifted, brave, grounded, resilient. She called Marianne delicate. She begged me not to destroy her daughter. Just lose some clarity in the finale, she whispered. A few blurred runs.
Arashta koda.
Nothing humiliating. Let the night stay open for her. And because I was 17, lonely, poor, desperate to be seen as good, and not merely hungry, I did it. I softened the attack in the finale encore round. I missed one inner voice. I blurred an octave run. I could have played in my sleep. The judges placed me second. Marianne placed first. The audience called it destiny. I called it sacrifice until the sacrifice became my prison. This time, the stage manager touched my elbow. Finalist 6. 2 minutes. I inhaled so sharply he frowned. Are you all right?
No.
I had lived a whole life after this moment. I had watched Marianne become the golden face of the European recital circuit, then watched her collapse under expectation by 25 and blame the pressure no one had allowed her to meet honestly. I had watched Isadora publish a memoir about protecting prodigy children from a cruel industry, while omitting the girls she fed to that protection. I had spent years replaying the night I lost, not because second place is shameful, but because I knew the loss was not true. I had carried that false note inside me until it poisoned every stage I touched. I had become the pianist who almost won. Almost. The word ruined more careers than failure ever could. Yes, I said to the stage manager. I'm all right. My voice came out low and strange. Older. He stepped away. I reached into the pocket sewn into my black performance dress. My phone was there, small and silent. In my first life, I had left it in the green room because Isadora said phones made young artists look distracted. This time, I turned on the recorder and tucked it back into the pocket, screen facing inward. The red glowed briefly before darkness covered it. Then I looked across the backstage corridor. Mr. Navarre stood near the instrument cases, one hand on his cane, silver hair untidy, eyes already wet because he always cried before my performances and pretended it was allergies. He was the only adult in my first life who ever suspected something had gone wrong that night. When I lost, he did not scold me. He said, "You stopped telling the truth in bar 312. I denied it so fiercely, he never asked again. Years later, after my hand injury, he mailed me a recording of my Aurelian semi-final with a note. That girl is still real, even if the world did not pay her. I never answered. Shame loves unopened letters. This time, I met his eyes. He frowned immediately. Teachers who truly listen to students can hear fear before sound. I lifted 2 fingers to my pocket, then toward the green room corridor. His expression sharpened. He understood enough to come closer. The stage lights dimmed. Adrian Cho left the stage, smiling too tightly, sweat on his forehead. He passed me and whispered, "Good luck." In another life, I had barely heard him. Now I saw the exhaustion behind his smile, the way every finalist was being ground through the same machine and told the dust was prestige. The announcer's voice boomed from the hall. Our next finalist, performing Sergei Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3 in D minor, is Celeste Vale. Applause. A door of sound. The stage manager nodded. I stepped through the curtain. The hall opened before me like a black sea rimmed in gold. 3 balconies. Crystal lights. Judges seated in a box to the left. Maestro Leontes, critic Helena Vero, pianist Anika Sato, conductor Pavel Aline, and 2 donors pretending not to judge taste by family names. The orchestra sat waiting, bows lowered, brass gleaming, timpani still. At center stage, the piano waited like an animal in moonlight. In my first life, I walked toward it with terror and hope. This time, I walked toward it carrying death, betrayal, muscle memory, and the recorder beating red in my pocket. I bowed. The audience clapped.
Iset.
The bench height was half an inch too low. It had been the first time, too. Back then, I accepted it because changing it felt arrogant. This time, I adjusted it. A tiny creak echoed in the hall. Someone coughed. I placed my hands in my lap and looked at Maestro Aline. He lifted the baton. I breathed. The opening orchestral phrase began. Rachmaninoff does not forgive lying. People think the 3rd concerto is difficult because of the notes, the stretches, the speed, the athletic terror of it. They are right, but not enough. Its real cruelty is that it exposes why you are playing. If you chase brilliance, it becomes noise. If you chase beauty, it becomes perfume. If you chase approval, it eats you bar by bar. The opening piano entry is almost plain, a narrow melody, simple enough to sound like memory walking barefoot. In my first life, I played it beautifully because I still believed beauty could save me. This time, I played it honestly. The first notes fell into the hall, quiet and direct, not asking permission. My hands knew the keys. My body knew the distance. The orchestra answered. I felt the hall shift. Not because I dazzled them, because I did not beg. The first movement widened. Left hand steady, right hand singing, inner lines alive but not fussy. I heard Mr. Navarre's old instructions in my bones. Do not decorate the truth. Do not apologize for sound. Make the bass line a road, not a carpet. The piano thundered, whispered, argued, surrendered, rose again. At the first big climb, my pulse tried to outrun me, but I let the rhythm hold. The cadenza approached like a cliff. In rehearsal, Maestro Aline had warned me not to take the Ossia cadenza because it was too large for a young woman's hands, and Mr. Navarre nearly threw his cane at him. I had taken it anyway. In the first life, I played it like a challenge. This time, I played it like testimony. Chords crashed under my palms. The left hand leapt. The right hand burned. But beneath the virtuosity, I kept the line. That was what Isadora never understood. Power without line is only noise. Line is what survives after applause fades. By the end of the first movement, the hall was no longer breathing normally. I felt it. Musicians feel audiences the way horses feel riders, through pressure, silence, shared fear. The second movement opened with the orchestra, mournful and suspended. My hands hovered above the keys. I thought, absurdly, of my mother sitting somewhere in the back row in the navy dress she had altered herself, clutching a program she could not pronounce. In my first life, after I lost, she told me second place was still a miracle. I snäppte här. I said she did not understand. That sentence haunted me for years because she understood too well. She understood washing other people's sheets to pay for piano lessons. She understood pretending rent was not late, so I could eat before competitions. She understood that second place earned honestly can be a blessing, but a stolen second place becomes a stone. This time, I would not hand her a stone and call it grace. The finale began. Fast, relentless, bright with danger. My right hand flew through passagework that once became my chosen betrayal. Bar 312 approached, the section Mr. Navarre had named years later. You stopped telling the truth there. In the first life, that was where Isadora's plea finally took over. I blurred the run just enough. A listener might call it nerves. A judge might call it instability. I called it kindness until kindness destroyed me. Now bar 312 arrived under my fingers, clean and sharp and alive. I did not blur. I did not soften. I did not make room for Marianne's myth. I played the passage as written, as learned, as earned. The orchestra surged. The final pages raced toward me like fire. My hands hurt. My lungs burned. I stayed with it. The last chord struck the hall, one after another, enormous and final, and when the final note rang, I lifted my hands and let it die properly before moving. Silence. Not failure silence. The other kind. The rare, terrifying silence after truth enters a room and people need 1 extra second to remember applause exists. Then the hall erupted. It hit me physically. People stood. Not everyone at first, then more, then rose. The orchestra tapped bows. Maestro Aline turned and looked at me as if he had discovered something inconvenient. The judges were speaking to one another. Helena Vero, who in my first life wrote that Marianne possessed the unteachable quality of inevitability, had stopped writing entirely. I stood, bowed, and for one dangerous second, I felt joy without fear. Then I remembered. The plea came after the performance. Backstage swallowed me in heat and darkness. The stage manager whispered, "My God." I barely heard him. My dress clung to my back. My hands trembled from effort. Mr. Navarre reached me, before anyone else. He did not hug me. He looked at my face, then at my hands. "You played all the way through," he said. The sentence meant more than applause. My throat tightened. "This time," I whispered. His eyes changed. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, Isadora Bellamy appeared at the end of the corridor. She was exactly as I remembered. Tall, elegant, pale gold hair twisted at the nape, pearl earrings, a silk shawl the color of cream, the face of a woman whose sorrow looked expensive enough to be trusted. She moved toward me quickly, not running because women like Isadora did not run where donors might see. Marian stood behind her near the green room door, already dressed in her ivory gown, face too pale beneath stage makeup. She looked young.
That startled me.
In my first life, I had turned her into a symbol. Thief, princess, beneficiary. Now, reborn, older in a young body, I saw a frightened girl about to walk onto a stage after hearing the kind of performance that tells every lie in your training to sit down. Isadora reached me and took my hands. Her fingers were cold. The recorder in my pocket listened. "Celeste," she whispered, tears already shining. "My darling girl, what have you done?" In the first life, that sentence began the trap. It made my excellence sound like harm. This time, I gently pulled one hand free. "I performed." Her expression trembled. "You performed like you wanted to end her." Mr. Navarre stiffened. "Madame Bellamy," he said, voice sharp. She ignored him. Her whole focus remained on me, intimate, urgent, motherly in a way that weaponized every hunger I had ever carried. "You heard her in rehearsal. You know Marianne is not made for war. She is made for music. If she goes out after that, she will shatter." "Then she should not be sent out to win a war," I said. Isadora blinked. That was not the old line. In the first life, I had said, "I'm sorry." She had used that opening like a blade. "She is a child," Isadora said. "So am I. You are different." There it was, the curse dressed as praise. "You have hardness. You have survived things. That gives you power. Marianne has only ever had music." My jaw nearly dropped. Only ever had music. Marianne had teachers flown from Vienna, a private recital hall, custom gowns, critics invited to salon evenings before she turned 15. I had a cracked upright piano in a church basement where the heating failed every winter. But Isadora was not talking about resources. She was talking about fragility as entitlement. "What are you asking me?" I said. Her eyes flicked toward Mr. Navarre, then back to me. "There is a final jury callback after all finalists play. They may ask the top candidates to repeat a section or play the required etude. If they call you, do not play it like that again. Lose brilliance. Lose edge.
Rush.
Let it be human. Give Marianne room to stand." Mr. Navarre's cane struck the floor. "Absolutely not." Isadora turned on him, tears gone from her voice though not her eyes. "You know what this industry does to girls who break publicly." "I know what it does to girls asked to break privately," he snapped. She looked back at me, tightening her grip on my remaining hand. "Celeste, please. I am begging you. Bomb the call back. Not the whole night. Just enough. My daughter's entire life has been built toward this. She cannot place beneath you by a humiliating margin. She cannot survive it." My chest constricted. In the first life, the word survive did the damage. I thought of Marianne crying into her mother's shoulder. I thought of myself as strong, as if strength meant absorbing injury without making anyone uncomfortable. Now I thought of the years I spent not surviving at all, just continuing. If her life depends on me playing badly, I said, then her life was built wrong. Isadora's face changed. Just for a second. Under the tears, anger flashed hard and bright. "You ungrateful little thing." There she was, the mother beneath the martyr. Mr. Navarre inhaled. My phone recorded. "Ungrateful for what?" I asked. "For being allowed into rooms where girls like Marianne carry the tradition." The words came too fast for her to stop them. She heard herself, and her mouth closed. The corridor seemed to freeze. Marianne, still near the green room, had heard. Her face looked as if someone had slapped her. Girls like Marianne, I repeated. Isadora recovered, reaching for softness again. You mean girls from families like mine are allowed in as inspiring contrast, not winners. Do not twist my words. I don't need to. They're recorded clearly enough. Her eyes dropped to my pocket. The air changed. You recorded me? I recorded myself backstage for performance notes. It was close enough to truth to hold. Mr. Navarre stepped slightly in front of me. This conversation is over. Isadora looked at him with pure hatred. You have no idea what you're doing to her. Which girl? He asked. For the first time, she had no answer. The stage manager called softly from the far end. Finalist 7, stand by. Marianne flinched. Isadora turned. Suddenly mother again. Marianne, her daughter, did not move. She was staring at me, not with hatred, not exactly. With terror. With accusation. With something like envy. Did you know? I asked her quietly. Know what? Her voice shook. That she was going to ask me. Marianne's mouth opened. Closed. She looked at her mother. That was answer enough. I should have hated her cleanly. It would have been easier. But standing there, sweat cooling on my back, hands still burning from Rachmaninoff, I saw Marianne Bellamy as another kind of trapped instrument. Tuned constantly. Protected from wrong notes until wrongness became fatal. Told she was delicate whenever someone else had to be sacrificed to keep her untested. That did not absolve her. She had accepted the results. In the first life, she accepted the grant, the tour, the interviews, the myth. But perhaps she had never once been allowed to hear a truth that was not filtered through her mother's fear. Play your program, I said to her. Not your mother's panic. Not mine. Yours. Her eyes filled. Isadora snapped. Do not speak to her. Marianne whispered. Mother, stop. The two words were so small, I almost missed them. Isadora did not. Her face went white. Then Marianne walked onto the stage. The audience applauded warmly. I remained in the corridor, listening. She opened with Chopin, as expected. The first phrase was beautiful. Painfully beautiful. Marianne had a gift. That was the tragedy. Her touch could make a melody seem lit from underneath. But beauty unsupported by structure becomes mist under pressure. The first page sang. The second tightened. By the development, her left hand rushed. She recovered. Then came the list. Too fast. Too bright. Isadora stood rigid near the monitor, lips moving silently with the score. Mr. Navarre kept one hand on my shoulder like an anchor. The run before the second climax slipped. Not disastrously. Enough. Marianne pressed harder. The octaves sharpened into attack. The hall, which had leaned toward her at first, began to pull back. Audiences know when a performer is pleading with them to confirm a story. The final chord landed loud, but not deep. Applause came, generous but relieved. The remaining finalists played. I barely heard them. The recorder file sat in my pocket like a coal. Isadora did not speak to me again. Marianne disappeared into the green room and did not come out until the jury callback list was posted. In my first life, the callback included Marianne, me, and Adrian Cho. Isadora found me before it, begged, and I obeyed. This time, the list went up on the backstage screen. Celeste Vale.
Adelian Cho.
Sophia Wren. Not Marianne. Gasps moved through the corridor. Marianne's name was absent. Not second. Not third. Not called. Her face emptied when she saw it. Isadora made a sound like air leaving a punctured lung. No, she whispered. There must be an error. She strode toward the jury liaison. Where is my daughter? The liaison, a young man who looked as if he would rather crawl under the piano, checked his clipboard. Miss Bellamy is not in the callback group. That is impossible. The jury scores. Get Maestro Leontes. Her voice cracked like a whip. People turned. Marianne stood behind her, very still. For once, everyone backstage saw what protection looked like when denied an outcome. Not love, but fury searching for staff. The callback was almost cruel in its simplicity. The jury asked each of us to play the required Bach fugue section and a repeated excerpt from our concerto.
No orchestra. No lights.
Just piano, score memory, and the judges close enough to hear every breath. I played Bach like architecture. Each voice distinct, no pedal to hide behind, no emotional fog. Then the Rachmaninoff excerpt from the finale. Bar 312 again. The universe has a sense of humor sharp enough to draw blood. I felt Isadora's plea like a ghost to my shoulder.
Bomb it.
Just enough. Give her room. I placed my hands on the keys and played it cleaner than before. Not faster. Not louder.
Cleaner.
When the final note ended, Anika Sato looked directly at my hands, then at my face.
Thank you, she said.
It sounded like a verdict. The results were announced at 10:40 p.m. on the main stage. All finalists stood in a line under the lights. My mother sat in the back row, clutching Mr. Navarre's extra program because she had crumpled hers beyond recognition. Isadora stood near the side aisle, face composed again, one hand on Marianne's shoulder. Marianne looked hollow. I searched myself for satisfaction and found something more complicated. I wanted to win. I wanted the truth. I wanted the life stolen from me. But I did not want Marianne destroyed. That was the difference between justice and Isadora. Justice requires the false structure to fall. It does not require dancing on the person trapped inside it. The announcer began from 10th place. 10th, Dmitry Kalin. Polite applause. 9th, Marianne Bellamy. The hall shifted. Not loudly. Worse.
Softly.
A collective recalculation. The Academy Princess. The expected winner. 9th. Marianne's face went perfectly still. Isadora's hand tightened on her shoulder, so hard I saw the fabric pull. Marianne stepped forward, received the certificate, bowed, and returned to the line. She did not cry. That made it harder to watch. In my first life, she won because I made room for her. In this one, without the room I carved from my own body. 3rd, Adrian Cho. Applause. 2nd, Sophia Wren. Sophia gasped, then laughed. First prize and recipient of the Aurelius Grant, Celeste Vale. My name left the announcer's mouth and became a sound outside my body. The hall rose. Mr. Navarre covered his face. My mother stood too fast, nearly dropping her bag, shouting my name like we were at a football match instead of a classical final. I stepped forward, legs numb, hands still. The metal ribbon brushed my neck. The certificate touched my fingers. Cameras flashed. Applause thundered. I looked toward the side aisle. Isadora was not clapping. Marianne was. Very softly, but she was clapping. Isadora's complaint evaporated. The competition issued a private censure and barred her from backstage access in future years. Publicly, people knew only that there had been inappropriate finalist contact. Privately, every conservatory knew by spring. Isadora Bellamy had begged the poor finalist to bomb for her daughter. Her daughter placed 9th anyway. Music circles are small, vicious, and excellent at remembering shame when it comes with a good sentence. But the part no gossip column understood was what happened after. Marianne vanished for 6 months.
No interviews.
No apology tour.
No dramatic collapse.
When she returned, she enrolled at a smaller conservatory under a teacher famous for rebuilding technique from the ground up and making prodigies play scales for a year until they stopped performing their own mythology. I heard this through Mr. Navarre, who pretended not to care and cared deeply. Good, he said. 9th can be a beginning if no one keeps calling it death. The Aurelius Grant took me to Vienna. The first winter nearly broke me in a completely different way. Winning did not turn life into a montage. The conservatory halls were cold. The practice rooms smelled of old wool and ambition. My German was clumsy. My scholarship covered tuition, but not loneliness. Critics who praised my competition performance waited eagerly for me to become either genius or cautionary tale. I worked until my back ached, then learned slowly that working like terror is still being controlled by the people who once asked you to fail. Mr. Navarre wrote letters every month. My mother called every Sunday, usually during dinner service because she forgot time zones. Are you eating? She would ask. Yes. Are you lying? Also yes. She sent money she could not spare. I sent it back hidden in gifts. We both pretended not to notice. My debut recital in Vienna came 11 months after Aurelian. I almost sabotaged myself anyway. That is the part people never understand about stolen futures returned. You do not simply step into them like a gown. They feel too expensive, too visible, too likely to be taken away if you breathe wrong. During rehearsal, I kept rushing the final movement of Prokofiev because some part of me still believed speed could outrun judgment. My new teacher, Frau Keller, stopped me mid-bar and said, "You are playing like someone is about to ask you to apologize."
Ist sehr her.
No one is. Then why are you answering them? I went back to my practice room and cried into the sleeve of my sweater for 10 minutes. Then I played the passage slowly until it belonged to me instead of to fear. The recital went well. Not mythically.
Well.
A critic wrote that I possessed ferocity disciplined by conscience. I cut that line out and mailed it to my mother, who taped it above the kettle and told customers I had been called a disciplined ferret. English was not her first language, and she refused correction when the wrong version amused her. I began to build a career, not the overnight legend Isadora once tried to steal for Marianne, but something steadier. Competitions, recitals, chamber music, recordings no one bought at first, reviews that praised and bruised, teachers who helped, conductors who tried to shape me into something more marketable, managers who asked whether my background story could be made more emotionally accessible. I learned to say no with a smile sharp enough to cut contract clauses. 2 years later, Marianne wrote to me. A handwritten letter arrived at my Vienna apartment in a cream envelope with no return address, though I knew the handwriting from old program signatures. I almost threw it away. Then I opened it over the kitchen sink, as if it might leak. She wrote, "I used to believe you took something from me, because that is what my mother needed me to believe. I now understand she was asking you to give me something I had not earned. 9th place was the first honest thing that happened to me in years. I hated you for 6 months. Then I listened to the recording of your Rachmaninoff and realized I did not hate you. I hated that you sounded free." I sat on the floor after reading that. Not because all was forgiven, because truth had arrived from the last place I expected it, and it was heavier than revenge. I replied after 3 days. "Freedom is not a sound. It is a habit. Practice slowly." Mr. Navarre said that was the most pianist response imaginable and that I should be ashamed. Marianne wrote back once more, enclosing a program from a small recital where she played Bach, Schubert, and no Liszt. A note in the margin said, "I stayed with the tempo." Good. Maybe that was enough. Maybe not. Other people's healing is not a performance we are owed. Isadora did not heal in public. She rebranded. Parents like her always find language. She began giving talks about ethical guidance for gifted children and the dangers of competitive cruelty, carefully positioning herself as a mother who had loved too fiercely. The first time I saw a poster for one of those talks, I laughed so hard Frau Keller came in from the next room to check whether I was choking. "What is funny?" she asked. I showed her. She read it, sniffed, and said, "People who love too fiercely usually mean they loved winning." Then she made me practice trills. That was her answer to almost everything.
Sekangdam?
Trills. Heartbreak? Trills. Fever? Slow trills only. Years passed. My hands remained whole. That was the miracle I returned to whenever applause became too loud. I cared for them like they were not mine alone, but entrusted to me by the girl who almost lost them. Warm-ups.
Rest.
Technique rebuilt to avoid injury. Refusing conductors who demanded unsafe rehearsal schedules. Refusing managers who wanted 3 concertos in 4 nights. The first life had taught me how fragile a career becomes when you believe pain proves devotion. The second taught me that survival is also musicianship. A hand that can still play at 40 is worth more than one dazzling season of self-destruction. At 31, I returned to the Aurelian competition as a guest artist. Not a judge yet. I was not ready to sit behind a table and pretend objectivity came free with a black dress. I played the same Rachmaninoff concerto on the opening night because apparently I enjoyed emotional violence when scheduled properly. The hall looked smaller. Or perhaps I had become less afraid of velvet. My mother sat in the front row this time, wearing a dark green dress and the expression of a woman prepared to fight the chandelier if it fell. Mr. Navarre was older, came replaced by a wheelchair he hated so passionately it seemed afraid of him. Marianne attended too, seated 3 rows behind my mother, no Isadora beside her. She had become a teacher by then, known not for prodigy making but for helping young pianists recover after competitions. That, I thought, was a decent use of 9th place. Before going on stage, I stood in the same backstage corridor where Isadora once held my hands and asked me to cut myself smaller. The walls had been repainted, the green room furniture replaced, but the corner was the same. I placed my hand against the wall and felt nothing supernatural. No music from another timeline.
No ghostly applause.
Just paint, plaster, old building hum.
Good.
Some places should become ordinary again. The stage manager, a different one now, said, "Miss Vale, ready?" I smiled. Yes. And I was. The concerto began. This time, I did not play it to win. I did not play it to prove that Isadora failed, or Marianne placed 9th, or the judges had chosen correctly, or the first life had been avenged. I played it because the opening melody still walked barefoot through memory, because the cadenza still asked whether power could keep a line, because bar 312 still existed, and I could still tell the truth there. When the final chord ended, the silence came again. This time, I welcomed it. Silence is not always a threat. Sometimes it is the hall making space for what has just happened. Applause rose. I bowed. In the front row, my mother cried without shame. Mr. Navarre shouted, that bench was too low, because even at 80, he remained impossible. The audience laughed. I laughed too. After the concert, Marianne found me backstage. She looked older, softer around the eyes, her blonde hair cut short. "You played differently," she said. "So did you, I hear." She smiled. Slower.
Good.
She looked toward the corridor corner. I used to think that night ended my life. It didn't.
No.
It ended my mother's version of it. We stood in silence for a moment, 2 women shaped by the same request from opposite sides. "I'm sorry," she said, "for not stopping her, for accepting what she took, for clapping after you lost like I didn't know something was wrong." The apology was late. It was also real. I let it stand without rushing to comfort her.
Thank you, I said.
"I needed to say it," she whispered. "I know." Then, because some wounds deserve music more than speeches, we walked into the practice room and played 4-hand Schubert badly until both of us were laughing too hard to count. If people tell the story now, they usually make it sharp and simple. She begged me to bomb it for her daughter. Her daughter placed 9th. It sounds like revenge, clean and satisfying, a mother's manipulation punished by numbers. But the truth is messier and more useful. Marianne placed 9th because the jury finally heard her without my silence, making room for a myth. I won because I played the work I had prepared instead of the wound someone asked me to perform. Isadora lost because she believed love gave her the right to rearrange other girls' futures. And I survived because, at the exact bar where I once blurred the truth, I kept my hand steady. That is what I want remembered. Not the medal, not the applause, not the gossip that followed Isadora through conservatory corridors like perfume gone sour. Remember bar 312. Remember the moment a young girl who had been taught to be grateful for entry decided not to pay admission with her own erasure. Remember that bombing does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is one blurred run, one softened ending, one missing edge, one tiny self-betrayal small enough for everyone else to call gracious. But the body remembers. The hand remembers. The music remembers. In my first life, I gave away one passage and lost the sound of myself for years. In this life, I played it clean. Marianne placed 9th. I placed 1st. But the real victory was not the ranking. It was walking off stage with my hands still mine, my mother cheering too loudly, my teacher crying badly, and no one else's daughter standing inside the silence I had carved out of myself. I learned that night that compassion without truth is only another kind of cruelty. I learned that strength does not mean absorbing every request to break. And I learned that when someone begs you to make yourself smaller so their child can feel large, the kindest answer is sometimes the one they call merciless. Play the notes. Let the judges judge. Let the fragile myth meet the stage. Let ninth place become information instead of death. Let the girl with the cheap dress and the church basement piano sit at the Steinway, lift her hands, and refuse to lie in the language she knows best.